we feel this is a strong document. Is this going to help the child obtain their post-secondary goals? So it's another good tool that can really make the process of writing an IEP really tailored to an individual's needs. This is a slide from part one, and this is stemmed from the requirement that there are goals in the IEP that are aligned to the post-secondary goals in the transition plan. And that really enables the document to be very fluid between the transition plan and the programming, so section 6 and section 10. And in most cases, I wouldn't say most cases, but transition plans are kind of that thing that's at the end. We do the IEP, we talk about the goals, we talk about the services, accommodations, and then, oh, let's do the transition plan too. The document itself says, right at the end of considerations, the child has a transition plan, go to the transition plan now, before you go through the goals and the services, so that there is, alignment between what's being worked on in the transition plan and what's being worked on and what's being documented and provided to the child in terms of goals and accommodations and services. So this creates that alignment. So you can see that there could be one goal for each, or there could be one goal in the IEP that addresses all the post-secondary goals. So there's different options. This slide is really just to reiterate that if there is a goal in the transition plan, which there has to be an education and training and employment goal, there should be very clear alignment to an annual IEP goal, whether that be an academic IEP goal or a functional developmental IEP goal. There needs to be that alignment. That's one of those requirements that has to happen from the indicator. So these are, then I think I have 4 examples of IEP goals. So what part 1 does, the part 1 training I'm referring to, is it encourages IEP teams to look at goals that are already existing in the IEP and to see if there's alignment to the post-secondary goals. If there's a reading comprehension goal in the IEP, if the child needs to gain mastery or proficiency of their reading comprehension skills that will enable them to access the education and training goal in their transition plan, there is minimum alignment between that. It's compliant alignment. I don't want to say minimum, but compliant. And so what this does is this is an example of a goal that is created based off of a child's disability and has very clear alignment to what the child is interested in doing post-secondary. What we see a lot is when individual IEPs have transition goals, they're not skill-based. And this IEP is a skill-based document. We identify an individual with a disability, we identify deficits that are to such a degree that require special education services, and that creates the alignment in the document, is that you have these deficits identified and there is programming to close that gap or lessen the adverse impact of the child's identifying disability. When transition goals are written, they are very outcome-based in terms of the child will fill out an application, or the child will do research to see how many potential job opportunities for them. In terms of having that be an IEP goal, there's no deficit that would align to that. It's measuring an outcome as opposed to measuring the development of a skill, which is the intent of an IEP, is to develop the skills that are up to such a degree that require special education services. So a lot of that, filling out applications, writing a resume, that's all really good information that you would put into 10F of the transition plan, but it's not really appropriate to be an IEP goal, because in order for there to be an IEP goal, there has to be a need, which would have to be supported by an evaluation. So by including resume building as an IEP goal, it's not aligned to the child's disability. It's a great skill that the child should have access to, but it's better served as a transition service in section 10F. So what this does, it looks at the child's disability, the deficits of the child, and it aligns it very clearly to enable the child's progress to meet their post-secondary goal. So this is David, he's in 11th grade, he has a specific learning disability, specific to reading comprehension. And we know that since we've obtained his interests and preferences, he wants to be a truck driver. So this is what a goal could look like. So by January 16, 2019, so hopefully he's already met it, given specially designed instruction and a passage from Maine CDL handbook.
Commercial driver's license.
Yes.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. Got it.
Sorry. David will accurately read and answer questions in various representations, whether it be multiple choice or short answer, etc., with 85% accuracy in 7 out of 10 trials as measured by teacher observations, student work sample, and formative assessments. And it is aligned to a standard, which every academic goal in the IEP has to be aligned to a standard at the grade level. So what this is looking at is it is addressing the child's deficits that identified them with a specific learning disability, but it is utilizing materials and close that gap and lessen the adverse impact, and it's aligned to his transition plan goals. So it's doing that 2 for 1. And when in comparison to just having any reading comprehension goal and just adding in language like in preparation for post-secondary education, this is really geared towards what he wants to do. And he's probably going to have a very high interest in this. So the instruction is going to be really quality instruction because you're going to have such significant buy-in from David that you can really develop that comprehension skill through something that he's really interested in. The next example is Billy. He's in 10th grade, he has another health impairment, and he's interested in working in retail. Right now, he's currently working in the school store, and that would be great information to include in section 10F, that right now, he's working in the school store developing those skills, especially if he's interested in working in retail. You can make a pretty strong assumption that his employment goal will be, post-secondary, he's going to work in the retail field or the retail industry. So by October 9, 2018, given consultation services and while working in the school, an appearance 80% of the time for trying to what Billy wants to do post-secondary, and he is working on skills that are based off of his disability. OHI, he may have ADHD, and he may have some impulsive behaviors, and now he's on a consultation, so we know that he at least has a pretty solid foundation of coping strategies when he's feeling impulsive that he can utilize to maintain a professional demeanor and appearance while he is working in the school store. So it's very clearly aligning from the programming in the child's IEP to the transition plan. Next is Susie. She's in 11th grade. She has a speech and language impairment, and she's interested in working in education. Right now, she's doing an independent study in going to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classrooms, and is, working through that, getting some experience there. So her goal would be by November 12, 2019, given direct and consultative speech or language services and across educational settings, she'll communicate her thoughts and ideas, so she'll be teaching as a part of her independent study, using a variety of methods, whether that be text or giving a lecture or using technology. She'll provide clear understanding. She'll say in such a way that there will be clear understanding from the listener with 85% accuracy as measured by teacher and mentor observation, listeners' work samples, self-reporting, and communication rubrics. So she is continuing to work on her deficits, her expressive language from her speech or language impairment, but she is also she's doing multiple things. She's doing independent study that's getting her the credits that are necessary to graduate. She's getting very valuable work experience in a classroom that will definitely benefit her in her, her future training and hopefully employment in the education field. And then we have Nick, who's in 12th grade. He has an intellectual disability, and what he wants to do is live independently. He's currently participating in the Functional Life Skills Program. So by 4/5/2019, given SDI and a real-world opportunity within the community, Nick will independently express his needs and wants to a teacher or employee of given establishment, whether that be a restaurant or a store, with 65% accuracy in 2 out of 5 opportunities, as measured by teacher observation, communication checklist, and a self-advocacy self-assessment. So this goal really speaks to that need to promote self-advocacy within individuals with disabilities, that if Nick is interested in living independently, he's going to need to advocate for his needs. And this way, this is a part of his functional life skills program, that he will go out to the community and he'll advocate for what his needs and his wants are. So again, these 4 examples really build off of the basic the compliance that's outlined in part 1. What the training in part 1 says is that by adding language, given specially designed instruction and a real world opportunity in preparation for in retail field, or whatever it's tailored to the individual, that creates that basic alignment, that compliant alignment. But really, these 4 examples are examples of goals that it goes well beyond just a basic compliant alignment. It really is targeted instruction and targeted skill development for these individuals that will help them have better opportunities and enable them progress to attain their post-secondary goals, whether that be education and training, employment, or independent living. Any thoughts or questions on these 4?
Well, I think you're taking me to a new level, because I've gotten by quickly with, in preparation for continuing career education, knowing that was good enough. This is certainly better.
Yes, it absolutely is better, and what we're really thinking here is more about the individualized.
Yeah, sure.
We're taking it to that individual
Mhm.
IEP, not just a general statement. So we're trying to really, again, we're trying to move beyond compliance to a quality and a more individualized plan.
I always look at it as like the biggest barrier that's gonna get them to the job that they really want, and then you make those academic goals, and then say, listen, these are the goals, and this is why you need to work in it, and they're like, oh, like you're not, the reality is, you're not gonna get there unless you do X, Y, Z, and then we'll try to get it like an exploration day to go to that job or have someone come in and talk, because that's the only way you can talk to people in the face, but until they see someone besides the teacher or the transition person say it, they're like, whatever. But,
Well, I think it stands the better chance for student ownership in the process too.
course.
I think it really allows, it really supports the students, what they're saying, and makes their education more relevant, I think, particularly for the at-risk population.
Absolutely.
This is where what you want to do, and then we're listening to you.
Absolutely.
So this is how you begin.
A lot of our work in the general supervision system, which transition is a part of that big umbrella, is creating alignment within the document itself, from the disability category to the programming within it. And that's not always there. We're in the middle of monitoring right now, and we've seen IEPs that just aren't addressing the disability category. A really basic example that we see is a child with a specific learning disability that doesn't have academic programming in their IEP. So we've done a lot of work through our IEP training to shed some light on creating that alignment and how it's really beneficial. Writing IEP goals to that transition plan finishes that alignment. We talk a lot about disability category, identifying needs, present level of the needs, goals, services. Well, those goals can also branch off to make that alignment to the transition plan. So there is clear alignment from the disability category in section 2 all the way to section 10 of capturing the transition plan. So really creating that alignment by targeting the post-secondary opportunities, but also addressing the child's disability, which that's what the document is for, to address the child's needs that have such an adverse impact that require special education services. So what do we do with those individuals that I don't know what I want to do? Well, there are teaching strategies that can help with that. A lot of when you think about classroom management, when students come into the class, there's an activity to begin them, to settle them, then you get into the class, and then there's always that wrap-up, that exit ticket to kind of look at, do we need to do some pre-teaching, do we need to do some reteaching? Is there, did they get a good grasp on this? This is a good opportunity to obtain some transition assessment data from individuals with disabilities, ones that aren't interested in you providing them with transition assessments, or even those that don't know what they're gonna do. I know that there are freshmen, actually there's all, 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th grade, they don't know what they wanna do. So providing those exit tickets and using transition assessments as the exit ticket, whether it just be one question or two questions, you don't hand them a sheet, but just, even if you ask them one question, if there's a transition assessment that has 10 questions on it, and then over the course of 2 weeks, you hand them a note card and ask them, this is your exit ticket, answer this question. After 2 weeks, you have a completed transition assessment that really can help drive the programming within the transition plan. And it will open the communication lines to really say, well, over the last 2 weeks, you've shared all of this information. Have you considered this? And they may not have. So it really opens up the communication lines, especially for those individuals that don't want to think about what they're going to do after high school. They just want to, they don't want to. So it kind of opens the communication lines there, which is important. Transition assessments, if you do have an individual that is willing to participate in the transition assessments, that's great information to get. That if they don't know what they want to do, well, your transition assessment said that you have this skill set, or you're interested in this. Have you considered this post-secondary opportunity, which they may not have. And then transition services as well. So looking at 10F of the transition plan, school opportunities, whether that be advisory programs or college visits or career fairs, they can have those conversations with those individuals that are in the career field or that work at the college and provide that opportunity. So there are a lot of opportunities to assist those individuals that don't know what they want to do or are resistant to having those conversations. Just simply saying, like, well, I asked them and they said that they don't know what they want to do. That's not enough. So we really, as difficult as it is, as hard of a conversation as it may be, we have to, teachers and educators have a skill set that we need to go above and beyond to see if we can solicit some response that will help us help them have post-school success. Program of study, so this is 10E of the transition plan. The courses of study are directly correlated to post-secondary outcomes. So we know that the program of study should be an individualized schedule of what will enable the child progress to meet their post-secondary goals. We have to be very thorough and meaningful when we're identifying this program of study, because the courses that are completed really dictate the child's post-secondary educational opportunities. If a child wants to go to a 4-year college, them not accessing the general education setting, they may not have an opportunity to meet the admission requirements for a degree granting program. If the child wants to go into welding or automotive, then enrolling them in CTE courses, that will better prepare them. The sooner we have these conversations, that's why, and again, I was not involved in the process in having 9th grade or above be the beginning point for transition planning. But that probably was part of that conversation, that we need to prepare. 4 years is a long time, but starting early really is beneficial, especially if the child were to seek admission at a post-secondary institute. Their course of study should be projected out to enable them to at least have an opportunity to meet the admission requirements. High school graduation, just in general, we know that not graduating from high school has been correlated to unemployment and low wages, incarceration, poverty, and poor health. So it just really speaks to the importance of graduating high school. There's a 21.1% gap in graduation rates between students with disability and without, and that's from 2017. And so 65.5% of students with disabilities are graduating. So while, again, there's work to be done, in looking at the data from the previous 5 years, it has increased the last 5 years. So we are trending in the right direction, but there's certainly work to be done. There are 4 states in the country that have graduation rates for students with disabilities below 50%. So that means you walk into a resource room with 4 children receiving direct instruction, 2 of them are not going to graduate. So luckily, Maine is not one of those states where it's 72%, but it's out there. There are
Do you know how
states
that
out there.
compares to our graduation rate in Maine for those without disabilities,
Where I got that data didn't have
the comparison?
the comparison. But it would be safe to assume that the 21% gap would correlate to whatever that is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what schools and IEP teams should do in order to promote an opportunity to graduate, because we can't guarantee graduation, it's not what the document's intended for. But what we can do is we can look at data systems that identify those students at risk of dropping out. We can establish and maintain high-quality mentoring, both for the student that may be at risk, but also for those teachers that are responsible for educating these children that are at high risk. Mentoring on both sides, providing that high-quality mentorship that will help provide and build and maintain positive relationships between the teacher and the student and the school and the families. Opening up communication lines can only benefit the individual with a disability. And continuing to provide effective academic and social, emotional, and behavioral interventions for all children, specifically those with disabilities. But it's really, looking at those things will really help continue to move that needle to high school graduation, specifically for those individuals with disabilities. These are the resources that I utilize to help make this PowerPoint. And again, you have this PowerPoint, or you're going to be sent this PowerPoint, and if you want further information, all you have to do is click on it. Are there any questions about anything that we went over today?
I had a question, well, I have 2 comments, big surprise, and a question. The comment is that, as with many of us, having been in this field for many years, to see the influence of the Department of Ed really working with the school districts, I think is what makes the difference. Not that it's a heavy hand, but, I mean, it's the Department of Ed that's going to really set the standard for what the expectation is. So that's wonderful, and I just really am so pleased after all this time to see all that work that's being done, so congratulations. My question is around the compliance, because we didn't see much around, like, what is a post-secondary, what does a compliance post-secondary goal look like? And so, when you looked at indicator 13 and we're at 95%, does that include compliance with the language of post-secondary ed goals?
Yeah, so that looks at the compliance level, and a compliant alignment between an IEP goal and a transition goal is some language. There's no, like, you have to include this specific language, but it is something similar to, if the child's gonna go into welding, in preparation for a career in welding. Some language similar to that.
I'm looking at the IEP goal, I'm thinking about, is the post-secondary goal post-secondary? Because unfortunately, after all this time, we're still seeing a number of we work with 16 different districts, a number of IEPs that says, John will explore the possibility of.
Right,
as a
and
post-secondary goal.
And we are working really hard, as you know, with that compliance. We now touch a quarter of the state every year. So we went from a 6-year to a 4-year rotation in order to be consistent with that
Right.
Communication.
Because that's where I'm just surprised that it's 95% when we're seeing so much language in post-secondary goals that
So
really isn't.
it's important to note that, as Roberta said, each cohort is 25% of the state.
Mhm.
That data that we report is based off of the cohort that we're working with. So if you are working with a district that's not
Part of cohort.
part of the cohort, then those transition plans wouldn't be a part of our.
And like we know, there are a lot of trained teachers leaving and a lot of new ones coming in, and they don't get this information. So we, every year, offer, it's not required, but we offer part one to every school district that we touch. And they're not required to do it, but they often access it, and we provide other multiple opportunities if the school isn't able to really plan that. And that the department has placed, our department has placed a lot of money into that. We support, we reimburse for subs, if you need to have subs for us to do that training. We provide as much support as we can and resources to help with that. So it's a work in progress, it always will be a work in progress. And it's always, it surprises me, because we're in districts that I've been in twice already. And, sometimes, and we know this through just learning and adult learning, one time is not necessarily enough to hear the message of what needs to be done. And twice may not even be enough. Sometimes it's 3 and 4 times before we actually see change in practice. So oftentimes, you are seeing IEPs, and they may have been trained, but they still haven't had the opportunity to practice and make it part of what their practice is. So that's why we continue our process of going into the districts. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. That's why we're always looking for new and fresh ways to give the message, to reach teachers. We go to conferences, we bring back resources, we give out resources. So we're always trying to support the teacher who is supporting our children with disabilities. So it's a lot of work.
It's a lot, yes, it is.
It's a lot of resource and brain and capacity on our part as well, but we're trying very hard to maintain that.
And because you just don't have enough to do, my comment is around, the, trying to get ahead of the curve at some point in our lives around educating folks before they come into the education field, going into post.
Higher ed needs to be part of this conversation.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
Teacher
higher-
prep programs.
Yeah.
Because
Because they don't,
every campus in the state is teacher prep programs.
I-
University of Maine system has one on every campus.
and I agree, and I hear more often than not that I, when I talk to directors, we've heard it this week, I have new teachers who don't know how to write an IEP.
There's so many, I mentor new teachers and I'm on the certification in my school. The stuff that's coming in from some of these schools with like very little teacher supervision, very little with special ed, and not even attending maybe one IEP, not doing the paperwork, not, it's scary. And I'm having a rough time. I decided not to mentor special educators because they were so resistant to recommendations, like I'm being harsh. I'm like, no, this is the legal mandate. And I'm like, well, you're too harsh. I'm like, this is the legal mandate. You have to do this, and you have to include this. Well, I can get it on Google. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's really an epidemic, and it's scary as hell.
Well,
Put it that way. I'm sorry not to freak you out, but I've just seen it, that it's crazy, because they're getting these certifications without doing.
and I think that still though, keeping the conversation is, here is what's, we have to report this information. So it's our responsibility to make sure that the information is available to the teachers. And so we're taking that upon ourselves, and we will continue to do that, and we will continue to support the districts as long as they allow us to. It's not required, it's never been required, but when we do the trainings, we try very hard to, even, like today, we can give you contact hours. We're just sitting here and listening to this presentation because we want to make it as approachable and, as available as we can to you, because we think that the work that we do is important, and the work that you do with children with disabilities is ultimately the most important. And so we want to help children have better outcomes, especially post-secondary. So however we can help with that, we try to do.
Jen, I'd love us to consider, again, Roberta, because you just don't have enough to do, obviously, to come back maybe in the fall and go through the case study part of the presentation that you've done. I think that would be.
Because we might even
Yeah,
take the
it
PowerPoint from now to then.
Yeah. Always learning.
Well, what we do is we do a Google Doc, and we work through the case study, and we build the transition plan that you
Nice.
yourselves. I
Yeah,
think
that'd be nice.
So,
Yeah.
anyways,
That'd be great.
sure, yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, this is really
Thank you.
comprehensive, I
It's beyond compliance.
It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's great.
It's
Thank you.
Well, it's where the rubber hits the road.
So if we, when we leave, if you do have any questions, you can reach out to, you can email me or Colette, but they're gonna have no idea who you are. So what you can either,
We'll tell them you sent it.
there you go, yeah, you can email,
Blame it on
either Roberta or myself. We'd be happy to provide any clarity if we left, and then, what did they say about that clarity? So you have our contact information.
So we have done this presentation 2 other times.
Yeah, this was the third.
This was the 3rd time. We did it with some districts, and we're going to, again, open it up in the fall. Right now, we're in the height of monitoring, so, and like, we don't have enough to do. We still do training in results, as a result of our, requirements. But we are gonna probably offer this again, maybe late spring, May, June, this presentation with the case study, and probably in the fall. It's part 2, and so a lot of districts are saying, well, we still need part 1, and we need part 1 again. So but anytime you know of anybody that's saying, you've just heard this presentation, it's a great part 2, moving beyond compliance, and feel free to have their districts contact us, because we'd be glad to do it.